Hi nurses, welcome back. This is Nursing Now with your host Janelle McSwiggan. Today we're going to be diving right into freelance writing for nurses and how you can specifically get started. So the last couple of weeks we've been going over your options for remote nursing and why that might be conducive to your specific lifestyle and what the different types of remote roles are and what type of personality might be best suited to the different roles, as well as the credentialing process for some of those different roles. So I'm a medical writer for the past 6 years, and this is my specific specialty. So we're going to be going over freelance medical writing, which is the type of writing that I do and how you can get started specifically. So there's two main branches of writing and medical writing in general. There is freelance, and there is the traditional work role that you might think of. So we're going to define freelance first because it's a little bit different. So as a freelance writer, you're a business owner and you work with different people on different deliverables. So you might be having a reoccurring deliverable with that one type of business, or you might be a one and done and moving on to a next type of business. So when you're a freelancer, you're setting your own hours and rates because you're a business owner. So you're negotiating with another business to figure out what is a profitable margin for both of you guys. And because you're your own business, no one is making sure that you're clocking in and out. All they care about is that you get the work done. So there's no one there hovering around you, which is a really cool aspect of freelancing. You're also picking your own projects. As a medical writer that owns her own business, I get to say no to projects all the time. They ask me if I have time to fit it into my availability, and I either get to say yes or no based on what I have going on at the time. So that's really freeing. I know obviously at the bedside I could never say no really to a patient because I wasn't interested in that disease process, or we just really weren't vibing. So to be able to say yes or no to the type of roles I want is absolutely life-changing. It really takes back your sense of independence and gives you that role of owning your life back. Because you pick your own projects and you're your own business owner, you're also responsible for your taxes and your health care. This is a major hurdle for a lot of people that are starting out. I will say that you get used to it. You just set aside for your taxes, get an accountant, get someone that understands freelance writing and what that means. And you get used to it with time. It's not as big of a hurdle as you would think. And as far as healthcare, we're also going to go into your different options for that. You can either decide to get healthcare through your state, through your spouse, or through the federal government. So there's a couple of different options that you can have there as well. There's also a freelance market for healthcare, which is super interesting. And also, if you're a Canadian nurse, you guys are already set up, which is super cool. You're also always making sure that you're putting away for retirement. And because you're not paid for your time off, you're always putting away for your time off as well. That being said, you have unlimited time off. I just took, I think, 3 months off for my wedding and my honeymoon, and no one batted an eye. I just said, no thank you, I don't need that work right now. And when I came back, the same work was there for me. It's so freeing to be able to walk away and back into my role whenever I want without having to explain to anyone why I need the time off, or being limited to taking time off only between these certain weeks and having to work holidays and having to pick my favorite holidays that I have to spend with my family and without my family. When I'm a freelancer, it doesn't matter. I'm making all of those decisions for myself. So there's a lot of pros with freelancing. You have a higher pay because you're setting that higher pay. So I like to say that I give myself a raise whenever I feel like it. I give myself a raise once a year and really whenever I think I can. So it's really invigorating to be negotiating those rates for yourself. I know that I was denied a raise at the bedside, and that was a huge change for me. I decided right then and there I will never be denied a raise for that reason again. No one will ever hold that money over me. If you're someone that thinks that they deserve more because they're a really hard worker, they've had years of experience, and they feel like their wage doesn't match that, freelance writing is definitely a viable option for you. You also have an increased freedom. Like I said, it doesn't matter if I'm waking up at 9 and writing until 3, or writing at 5 a.m., or taking a break halfway through to go swimming, or taking a nap. cutting off early for a doctor's appointment. It only matters that I am meeting my deadlines for those deliverables. No one is watching me. No one is holding my hand. I'm a business owner. I'm responsible for my own fate, and that means that I have total freedom. No one cares that I'm working 40 hours or 7 to 7 or 7 to 3 or anywhere in between. It only matters that I am meeting my deliverables, which is amazing. Like I said, you can take time off whenever you want. You just have to build in for that. I've never had someone say no to me because that's not a thing. That's not something that happens. You don't get denied free time off. You're your own business. So you shut down when you want and you reopen when you want. You also take on more clients or less clients when you want. You really are the master puppeteer in this. So if you've always wanted the freedom and you feel like you just weren't really born to work underneath someone, freelance is a great option for you. It's also a greater sense of job security. I would argue that if you only have one job, you can get laid off from that one job. You can even get fired from that one job. As a freelancer, I have anywhere between 4 to 7 clients at any given moment. If one client leaves, it is no stress off of me because that is 1 out of 4, 1 out of 7. I can instantly start looking for another client, and I can also buffer by taking work with my other clients. I've never had all of my clients leave at once. That's not something that happens. So you do have a greater sense of job security. That being said, you do have to get that pool of clients to begin with. So it takes a little bit to get 7 clients. It takes a little bit to even get 4 clients. But once you get there, you have deliverables due at different times. You have different contracts that are starting and ending. So it's not very likely that you're not going to have work at all if you're layering them correctly and you're always having someone in your funnel coming down and you're aware of your deadlines and you're aware of your contracts and when they end. So I will argue that it does have better job security. The other more traditional route that you can do for writing is working for an actual company, and in this way you're an employee, not a business owner. And there are some pros and cons for that as well. The biggest pros are that you have retirement, taxes, and health insurance completely taken care of you. You do not have to think about that. Some people enjoy working for a company because it's less stressful for finding clients. You find one client and you're done. You don't have to worry about finding work. In these bigger companies, most of the time you're not working holidays. They're closed. You're a traditional 9 to 5. You get the holidays off. You get any weekends off. Most of the time you get nights off too. So you're not working those holidays like you were in the nursing department. That is a really big pro here. That being said, there are some negatives. When you're working for a traditional company, you're paid less. Mainly because you're not negotiating your rate, but also because they're taking away for taxes, benefits, and everything else, and you don't have a say in what portion goes to what. Some people are okay with that. They're fine with taking out for that and just being a cog in the machine, and they don't want the stress of running their own business and figuring out all those finite details of marketing themselves, finding clients, invoicing. A lot of things go into running your own business. It's not just writing. And some people can't handle that stress. Some people find that they're working more when they're a freelancer because there's a lot of back-end stuff. I don't necessarily find that, but that's been the experience of a lot of my peers. And that can cause increased stress. So when you're working for one single company and you're an employee instead of a business owner, you don't have that to worry about. That being said, you do have specific times where you clock in and clock out and you're on someone else's dime. So you don't have unlimited time off. They tell you what projects you're working on. You can't really say no. They'll just say this is for you. So you don't have that negotiation that you have with a business owner. And some people really thrive under the challenge of the business owning chess game, of being like, oh, what does this do for my business? What happens when we do this? What is this new client about? But for some people, it's just too stressful. It's too anxiety producing. And for those type of people, the traditional workplace is definitely a better option. That being said, sometimes traditional workplaces do get really heavy workloads and you can't really say no. Like, you can definitely talk to your manager, but I've heard especially with communication agencies, you can get really bogged down with a lot of work. So there are definitely pros and cons of each. You don't have to stay with one or the other for long, just in the same way that you don't have to leave the bedside and never come back. If you start as a freelancer, you can definitely transition to a full-time role and vice versa, I have definitely been offered each. So I don't think that you need to make a finalized decision right now, but I do think it helps for you to be aware of both paths that you can take, and that writing doesn't mean owning your own business, and it also doesn't mean working for someone indefinitely. That if you feel like one business model doesn't work for you, that you can hop back and forth to the other. And I know plenty of people that do that. I know people that have had their freelance writing business for 15 years and they just get sick of it. They get burnt out. They don't want to do it anymore, and they hop to a more traditional working role as an employee, and they find more happiness with that. So I think it really comes down, like I said, to your personality in a lot of these personal decisions, and there's no right or wrong. I think that when you're transitioning away from the bedside or to a reduced role, you really need to do a lot of self-reflecting and figuring out what's important to you, what's your personality type, and what you can really handle as a person, and what stresses you out and what invigorates you. What stresses out a lot of people for businesses really excites me. I work really well under pressure. I'm a nurse. I'm used to this. This is my bread and butter. So I love it, but a lot of people don't. So for writing, we have talked a lot about the different types of freelance writing that you can do for nurses, but if you haven't listened to my other episodes, I'm going to go through it again really quickly right now. Freelancing also doesn't just mean for writing, so I'm going to make this a little bit broader real quick. Nurses can be social media managers, so that means that we can do content creation across the board for Instagram, so pictures. We can do video for YouTube. We can create content calendars so that we're strategizing the different ways that we can use and repurpose different forms of content for, say, doctors, healthcare, hospitals, healthcare facilities, med spas, that type of thing. I know some nurses that are really successful as social media managers for really big companies, and they're loving it. It's a new fun way to use their license, use their intelligence in healthcare, but also to feed into fun aspects of branding and colors and that creative side for them that they never really got to use at the bedside. So social media manager is a super lucrative role, and you can do that as freelance or again as a full-time employee, but a lot of people are freelancers. You can choose to be a graphic designer, where you're basically creating logos, brand packages, websites, that type of thing. These days, everyone has a website, everyone has a personal brand. We're actually going to do an entire episode on personal branding and why it's so important for nurses and healthcare workers in general. But private practices are promoting their brands through SEO on blogs now, so they need websites. Bigger companies are creating billboards, so they need graphic designers. So it's a really up-and-coming field, and a lot of people are happy to support healthcare workers, especially nurses that know how to do graphic design. So that's another way that you can do freelancing. So we're going to focus really on writing because that's my bread and butter. We went over the different ways that you could do writing. So you can do blogs, which are basically informational articles. We can do white papers, which are a form of marketing. So you're trying to sell something, but also in as an unbiased, research-based way as you can, which is super interesting to me. These are higher paying, longer deliverables on average. Usually marketing is higher paying when you're writing. You can also do slide decks, which I like to call fancy pants PowerPoints. A lot of the time, your target audience can be doctors or healthcare facilities, and you're creating a visually appealing storytelling PowerPoint to drive home a main point. It could be a new treatment, it could be a new medication. They can be really long. I've seen like 45 slides long. You might create the whole deliverable or a portion of the deliverable. And you can also do the writing for websites. Now, you don't have to design the websites. I think that's really important. I didn't know that. You just have to do the writing for the websites. So those are some of the ways that you can do freelance medical writing. And specifically, those are really examples of like some of the niches. So what is a niche? So a niche is the like specialization in a particular area. So the same way that we specialize at the bedside, right? Pediatric care, or mental health, OBGYN, we want to specialize as medical writers. Now, you don't have to niche down, but there's some really important advantages to niching down. So we're going to go over that. And then we're going to go over some example niches and some decisions that you need to make. There's two parts to a niche. There's what you're writing. So what I just went over, the blog, the white paper, the slide deck, the website. And then there's your therapeutic interest. So neurology, maybe OBGYN, kind of like your specialty that you were practicing at the bedside. You could say, I write blogs as your niche. That's what you write. And then your therapeutic interest is I only write blogs on neurology. Another example is you could say, I write white papers as your specific deliverable, and then I only write white papers on infectious disease products, and that's your therapeutic interest. Once we start to mix and match the different deliverables, the format of the writing, and the different therapeutic interests, I mean, it's endless. You can really, really go deep here. So there's a ton of different areas that you can dive into. I think it's important to ask yourself a couple of questions when you're doing your niching, because it doesn't have to reflect your nursing specialty. So you have to figure out, is the area profitable? Can I make money in this? Does anyone want to read this article or this deliverable? And will people pay me for this? Is there any money in this? And is it marketable? Can I sell this to another person? Can I make a living off of this? Because remember, this isn't a hobby. We're not writing for fun. We're writing for money now. So it's a different type of thought process. The other thing is, am I interested in it? I think a lot of the time you do have to have some sort of a base level interest, because the good Lord knows I have tried to write about things that are not interested in me, and those articles took way, way longer. My house has never been cleaner than when I'm trying to write an article I don't want to write. Suddenly, like, my baseboards need washing, the dishwasher is spotless, I'm outside pulling weeds. You don't have to be interested in the deliverable that you write, but man, it makes your life way, way easier. So we'll use myself as an example. I don't have too much of a niche. I'm what's called a generalist. So I am a medical writer, and I choose to write about just about anything. That being said, I do have therapeutic interests. I enjoy mainly writing about neurology topics as well as infectious disease and oncology. I have not worked in those areas at the bedside. Let's break into that real quick. You don't have to write about what you worked in. That's one of the number one questions I get in my course, in my mentorship, and everything like that. And the follow-up question is like, why? How does that work? In the same way that I learned about a wide variety of concepts when I was in nursing school, I learned about OBGYN, I learned about surgery, I learned about med-surg, adult care, and I haven't worked in any of those fields. And I did clinicals in those areas. Some of those fields I've worked in, but you know. The same way, we have that educational background. And we were also taught how to research those areas. So we're not pulling from our clinical knowledge in particular. I'm not writing about my experience as a bedside nurse. I'm writing unbiased information about this topic based on the research that I can find in a nursing journal or a medical journal, and I'm creating a deliverable that can sell. So it has not that much to do with what I did as a nurse. I'm not really pulling on that much. In some scenarios, my nursing background or my clinical background offers more of a perspective than a deep understanding. That being said, I have written on some topics that I choose not to write about. So while I am a generalist with a therapeutic interest of neurology, oncology, and infectious disease, there are also jobs that I say no thank you to. And those include anything that have to do with tech and anything that have to do with OBGYN. Those are the most boring articles for me, and they take me the longest to write. So when I get them, I just say no thank you, that is not within my therapeutic interest, I'm just not interested in them. I've tried to write in those, they take a really long time. That being said, when I did write, it was a good article. It was evidence-based, it was accurate, it was empathetic, it hit the style guide, but it's just not what I'm into. The same way that I didn't want to work on an OBGYN floor, that I didn't want to work on some of these other floors, I don't have to write about everything. So knowing that is, why do we niche? So there's some pros and cons. One of the pros, you can bill yourself as an expert. So because you're working in this one area, it means that you know where to find research, you know where to find expert interviews, and you have a ton of background information in that area. So it's easier to bill yourself as, the neurology nurse. I have X amount of articles written for that. I can totally write about that. So you can bill higher. It's also easier to get work in that area because you already have the background in it. Same thing with if you've worked for 5 years on an oncology floor, it's going to be easier for you to get work on an oncology floor than someone that has no experience. So they do like to say the riches are in the niches. You can also say niche, whatever you want. And that is definitely true. That being said, there are some important cons. You definitely close yourself off to opportunity if you choose a niche that is like too narrow. If you're saying no to a bunch of different opportunities, then the niche isn't really helping you because you're saying no to work over and over again. There's also 2 other types of broad niches that I just want to touch on really closely before we move on. There's copy and content. Content educates your audience and copy sells to your audience. And there's some overlap in deliverables. I'll give an example. So you can write a neurology blog, and for content, that neurology blog will educate your audience. So say it's about MS and it's about symptoms, diagnostics, therapies, and it's not listing any specific products. It's just trying to educate and advocate for the patient. That's all. That's a content blog on neurology. Now we take the same exact deliverable and we do a neurology blog, but we make it copy. So that blog would be covering MS again, but instead of doing like diagnostics and symptoms, maybe it would cover supplements with specific products for people that have MS and a link to buy. So you can also decide if you want to do content or copy in the type of niche, which is the therapeutic interest and the deliverable. And you can keep it as broad or as narrow as you decide. Whatever supports you, your profit, your market, and your interest, and also your personality. So I think it's really important for you to ask yourself clarifying questions when you're doing that. So after you decide what your niche is, the next step is to build your portfolio. We're going to do an entire thing just on portfolio, and we also cover this on my YouTube channel, but we're going to touch base on it. A portfolio is basically your best 3 to 5 pieces. You want your niche or your portfolio to reflect your niche. So if you want to write, we're going to do neurology blogs again. If you want to write blogs on neurology, then your portfolio should be on blogs for neurology. The more relevant it is for the editor that you're sending it to, the more likely that you're going to get that certain job. It's best if it's published by someone else. It holds more weight. It shows that you've worked within an editorial team. You might have gotten paid for that. You might have a testimonial for that. So it's always better for someone else to publish your blog. I offer a portfolio building package exactly for this reason, so people can work within an editorial standard and figure out what that is actually like before they're actually working with an editor. I also offer guest blogging, which is another way that you can get published. That being said, if those don't quite work for you, there are some last resort options for you to build a portfolio. You can use Medium. You can start a personal blog, but honestly, that's a lot of work. You have to create your own website. You have to work with a graphic designer. You have to pay like $30 a month to host it somewhere, and then you have to keep updating it. So I don't really recommend the personal blog, but you technically can. Or you can post directly to LinkedIn. Again, does not hold as much weight as working with someone else, but it'll do the trick. I know one person that's been discovered on Medium, so it's possible that you can be discovered organically like that, but it is very, very low. So I would definitely not put all of your eggs in that basket. When you're creating your portfolio, you want to make sure that because it's really your first impression, you're sending something that is like as close to flawless as you can get. So no spelling mistakes, no grammar mistakes, and make sure it's your best work. So really take your time here. So that's your portfolio. You really need to make sure that you have your portfolio sorted out before you reach out to an editor, because that's going to be their first question. They're going to ask, can I see your portfolio? No one's going to hire you without knowing that you can write. It'd be like hiring a nurse without knowing that they have a license at all. Like, no one's going to do it. The other thing that I really recommend is having a writing resume when you get started. That's just a regular resume that's been tweaked to reflect the writing that you've done throughout the course of your nursing background. And if you've never written professionally before, I didn't either, and I was still able to use that resume rewritten to reflect the writing that I did at the bedside. We're constantly doing writing, so really pulling on those experiences and making sure that you have a resume that reflects the writing and not the nursing, because your editors don't care that you did a G-tube feed. They don't care that you know how to cast someone. They care that you know how to write. So making sure that you also have a resume that's targeted for writing is huge. There's some debate with resumes. Some people don't want to send them at all. Some people think that they're above them because they're business owners, not employees. It's a hot topic. My take is that I would rather be an easygoing person that just sent a resume than make the first impression that I'm going to argue with a resume. I think it takes like an hour to make, 5 minutes to update after I get a job, and I'm beating out every other nurse writer that thinks they're too good for a resume and doesn't want to submit it. There's also some jobs that will not let you apply without a resume, and they're very high-paying jobs. So I would much rather just create that document, swallow my pride, and send it in than close off writing jobs. To recap that, you want to figure out your niche, get a portfolio in that niche, get a resume to reflect that new writing career that you're going to be transitioning into. If you need help with a resume, there are resume writers that can help you. Sarah Fung is an amazing one, and she's actually a nurse too. So I'm all about supporting other nurses in their entrepreneurial passions, and Sarah's a really good one. So reach out if you need help with that too. Now that you've done all that, you can start finding clients and opportunities. I will say that I always recommend staying away from Upwork and Fiverr. I think those platforms are really saturated. There's a ton of high competition, and it's really hard to get a job there. Always have multiple different ways that you get clients. Don't stick to just one way, because that might dry up in the future, and then you're kind of like a one-trick pony and you're struggling to catch up. So what I always recommend is having multiple different funnels at any given time. And once you get that set up, it is really easy. I will say that my clients find me now organically, and that I really don't do client outreach anymore. So at the beginning, there is a little bit of a hurdle of setting up your business, but once it's set up, it's kind of like a crock pot, set it and forget it. There are some daily things that I have to do and keep track of, but the beginning is definitely the hardest. I think social media is a great way to find clients. I always recommend going to where your clients are. If you want to work on Instagram and write on Instagram, go to Instagram. Find your clients on Instagram. Same thing with LinkedIn, YouTube, that type of thing. Social media is booming right now, and it's a great way to find clients. Networking is always going to be superior to a job board. That's pretty much the end of this episode. It was a jam-packed episode. We're going to be going into medical writing and the different remote options further into other episodes. So if things didn't quite add up or you want more information, don't worry, it's coming. Just to recap, freelance writing is total flexibility, but they do have some caveats. On the other hand, you can work for a company, but it's not quite as freeing, but you do have the comfort of having your packages already paid for taxes and everything like that. If you want to do writing, you should pick a niche, build your portfolio off of that, and start looking for clients when you have your portfolio, niche, and resume already set up. There's a bunch of different ways you can find clients, and I'll be probably doing an episode on that because it is a very hot topic. So thank you guys for joining me today.